Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the AI Monetization podcast, where we discuss with industry leaders on business outcomes, real world outcomes of AI, specifically Gen AI. Today, we are honored to have with us Zia Zaman. Zia is the General Manager of Business Development Asia for Microsoft. Previously, Zia was CIO of MetLife Asia, where he ran the very successful Lumen Lab. Zia has a bachelor's and master's in MIT and MBA from Stanford, and his earliest interest in statistics, data science, and data analytics came from his time doing operations research at MIT and his time at Stanford. Zia also has a passion for renewable energy. He's a board member of the National Environment Agency and also the Energy Market Authority. Zia, thank you so much for taking time to do this.
My pleasure.
Uh, you know, Zia, given your role as head of business development for Microsoft, you probably have a front row seat into applications of AI and how enterprises and organizations are benefiting from it. What do you think are probably the core ingredients of a successful AI strategy inside an enterprise that you've noticed?
Binny, thanks for asking. And once again, thanks for having me. The simplest way of thinking about a good enterprise AI strategy is that it probably does two things. It probably helps you accrue cost savings, and it probably helps grow revenue. It sounds self-evident, but just doing one or the other misses the boat in terms of understanding the ways in which any technology strategy might work, but in particular when it comes to AI. I'll start with cost savings, if you don't mind, Binny. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah, please.
Yes. So one of the ways I think about the cost savings isn't just, oh, I save 10% doing this by using AI. It's more about whether or not you are generating a sustainable competitive advantage, a durable way of doing things that is better than your competition. The why is what matters. I'm not just doing this to get ahead. I'm doing this because it gives me a step up in terms of my productivity, a step down in terms of my cost. And AI might be the way in which, by deploying it, I gain that advantage over my competitor that's perhaps dragging his or her feet for some time. I'll use an example of insurance because I was in MetLife, the chief innovation officer for some time, and we saw this principle of this great industry, insurance, that nobody really thinks about every day when they wake up. But the thinking of this product is we will pool the risk and pay it out to everyone that's involved. Insurance companies used to be mutuals, where you basically carved up all the different premiums that you got and you distributed them 100% to your policyholders when they had a claim with a very small cut. As of right now, that cut is up to 40 cents on the dollar, Binny. So that's, in a way, it's leakage, but it's what it takes to run an insurance company effectively with all the controls and the compliance that you need. So what if you were able, over the course of some deployments of tech, in particular when it comes to AI, spend 30 cents on the dollar instead of 40? What if you were able to think through ways in which, instead of adding resources, you were able to add code, rules, ML, AI, Gen AI, workflow management, and wherever the AI is headed? And I think that that idea, that cost savings and just basically lowering how much it takes to run a complex organization because there is now AI at your disposal, is one of the best reasons why the cost savings angle is so important. Is a competitor able to close a deal faster, improving their win rate by 5% because they're using AI? If coding were to improve by 50%, are you able to take that cost savings and turn it into something that is durable? And the best way we've seen that happen, Binny, is not just creating more coffee breaks for the engineers, but maybe slowing down on the future hiring. And then finally, when it comes to throughput in terms of getting something done, does an AI-assisted team do better than a team that doesn't have AI? And there's a basis for all the cost savings bucket that your enterprise AI strategy might deploy. And it depends on industry, but generally speaking, insofar as you rewrite the rules about how much you need to do, you need to spend to go do something, AI helps you get there. When it comes to revenue growth, some people come to me and says, so what do I do with these people's time? Well, if you freed up time, then what do you want to do with it? If you're a doctor and you freed up time from doing diagnosis or paperwork, what might you do with it? Well, you spend more time with the patient. You listen, you ask better questions. If you're an engineer, if you freed up time, what might you do? You might think up new products and services. Or you might actually create new things. You might look at adjacent markets. You might build a new partnership. The idea simply is new revenue growth. One of the reasons why we don't see more of that is that we lack the creativity in the space because we're just too busy doing the jobs that we have. Someone in my company basically said it this way: we are all clerks, Binny. We're just clerks. We get in the morning, we take our coffee, we just power through our inbox, we handle our Slack or our Teams. We're just clerks managing information, and then the day's over and we go home. What if we weren't clerks? And we were able to take some of that clerk work and give it to an AI assistant or someone else. We might actually start thinking again. If you rethought the workflow of your company, how might you rethink what do you create? How you create value and who and for whom? And I think that's part of what Project Pro does. It says, look, there are these templates, there are these ways in which we do things. You use them, then you could maybe save some time and maybe rethink what it is that you do. I also want to talk a little bit about data. Maybe I'll hold that for a little bit for a future question. But data is also a big part of how you might want to build your enterprise AI strategy. So again, cost saving. And then from that time, think about new revenue growth.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, cost savings, new revenue growth eventually will result in more fulfilling lives and careers for all of us when we can get unchained from the clerkiness of our jobs. One thing I'm curious about is, and obviously you're the expert here, given that you were a managing director at Gartner, right? In my limited understanding of the previous technology waves, when enterprises adopt it, there's always a very clear ask for a specific ROI for tech adoption. Does it feel like with AI, there's a lot of euphoria into adoption because how cool it is and the ROI can come a little later? Do you see a lot of that happening with AI, which is unlike the previous tech cycles, or not really? There is the same demand for early ROI expectations in enterprises with AI.
My short answer is no. We've seen this movie before.
I see.
And it repeats itself. We're in Fast and Furious 9 now. And I saw it with Java. I joined Sun back in the day because they just invented this write once, run anywhere language, and it continues to be pervasive. You go back to the transistor, you go back to other cycles, and CFOs have always asked for the ROI. And something you said to me off camera earlier makes a lot of sense, which is, what is the outcome you're going to generate from a deployment of technology? And how does that outcome translate to, frankly, TSR? How does your company have a sustainable competitive advantage? How does it grow into new markets? How does it become a fitter version of itself? And that's what tech generally does. AI, though, has other sparkle to it that makes it seem like and. And yes, there will be ways in which you could generate ROI, and those will be business case related. And there will be new ways of doing workflow that you can't quite predict yet in that second season of AI. Once you've established the characters and now the plot's starting to get to develop. And then in that third season of AI, when we start talking about AGI, we're not completely sure exactly how it might work, but some magic will start happening. And so I think that what you're alluding to is that the promise of AI seems different. And it's probably true. The first season, the second season, the third season all put together seem like they exceed the returns of previous cycles. But no. All the time at Gartner, we saw these cycles, and it always is the same. Like, how are we going to generate justification for all the AI investment that we're putting in? And I just think that we're seeing it already.
Very interesting. And given that you spoke about seasons and the hype cycle and where are we going to see returns, right? I think there was this VC at Sequoia who put out this article saying AI is $600 billion question. And then he scaled it down to a $500 billion question. And he basically said, given the amount of yearly capex that's going into AI infra, which is about $600 billion every year, and he basically said OpenAI and Azure all put together is about $100 billion of revenue. Where is the remaining 500 billion going to come from? Where in the hype cycle do you think we'll start seeing the revenue keep pace with the infra spend? And where do you think a lot of that unlock will come from?
That's an easy answer because of the time at Gartner. We called it the plateau of productivity. I love that term because plateau is flat. It goes on forever. And it is when you achieve that next level of productivity gain. And it has borne out to be true over and over again. The thing that I often tell people about the not magic quadrant, I'm sorry, about the hype cycle is speed. Look at the tech as like a billiard ball on that cycle and see how fast it's moving. Because as we know, this particular Gen AI ball is moving very fast, up, down, and to the plateau of productivity. And there's not just one, right? There's benefits that's coming from inferencing and O1 and all the other things that might come, and eventually AGI, et cetera. So if you look at the most recent set of hype cycles, it's quite interesting that the speed with which it's getting to plateau of productivity is pretty fast. We're already seeing, if you don't mind me jumping right ahead to perhaps the next kind of question, which is, what are those horizontal use cases we're already seeing AI being justified for? Coding, we clearly see it. And it is about not eliminating coders, but just saying here's 44%, it's a magic number of tasks and code and line items that can be done using an assistant. And that 44% improvement is material. Customer service, there's so many different ways in which customer service basically helps with AI reduce cost, improve SAT, reduce dissat, improve revenue, feel more timely, feel more human. Analyst work is the third. I call it analyst work because I used to be a management consultant. Time at Gartner, the work that we do that we just can outsource to an analyst, and that analyst is now going to be AI. Everything from translation to summarization. And if you are not using summarization in a multilingual context, you really need to do that. And then creative marketing. I talked about throughput earlier, but there's a great little example right at the beginning, Binny. People were saying, we just gotten started weeks into the Gen AI cycle. And a Korean weblet company. So basically a company that puts out these little bits of animation every 2 weeks. They changed their throughput from once every 2 weeks using AI to do background shading and coloring to twice a week.
Wow.
So 4 times throughput improvement on something that everybody wants, the next episode, just done faster because somebody else is doing the coloring and not a human. And so you get that benefit of 20 episodes of Breaking Bad instead of 10 because it's just easier to build. Please don't use the Breaking Bad as an example team because they're not doing more, but I think you get my point there. So there's ways in which creatives can do what they do better. And that, I think to me, that's already happening in terms of what people are telling me they're using it for which there's clear advantage. Coding, customer service, sort of analyst work, and creative marketing.
No, those use cases make a lot of sense. Even internally at Project Prozia, one of the things, we kind of an experiential learning platform. One of the things we are hoping to solve was increase engagement on the platform. And we always knew that engagement goes up with quizzes. But we have thousands of tutorial videos on the platform, and it's a huge manual effort to make these quizzes. And it's a pretty technical skill, data science, and you have to find an expert and pay that person to make these quizzes. So like a couple of quarters back, we basically built an internal LLM pipeline where you feed it a bunch of videos and outcomes quizzes. And we were able to generate 9,000 quizzes over a few days, which would have otherwise taken us almost a year. And money that we didn't have to do that. So it's super powerful even at our scale.
I'm going to build on that. I think ed tech is a huge area.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go bring it back down to training and skilling, it's the easiest place for which you could create a business case early in the broader field of ed tech, right? I had the benefit of meeting Sal Khan the other day when we were in the US, and he's just so inspirational. But we have a partner that I don't think that they compete with you guys. You know, Mind Valley? So they're a big partner of ours, and they do personalized training and skilling. And you know, the quote, if you don't mind me kind of like summarizing it, is we don't just want to enhance productivity with Microsoft, but just to create a more human-centered workplace, right? And the partner helps bring that to life, because what they do is they take the Microsoft Copilot custom agent and then this Workway transformative platform, and it says, okay, as an organization, how do you put like humanity back at the center of it all, where you have an environment where you could say, I know who you are as a human. I want to help you with your personal growth. I want to help you with your transformation. I want your team to have a collective transformation. And then these teams are able to connect and grow and get to reach their potential that goes beyond just simple productivity tools. And that's what Mind Valley is working on with us. And you know, stay tuned for more announcements about the work that we've done with them. And then in the HR world, which is adjacent, we have another partner, and I'm jumping ahead here because I know you asked me to prepare for some partners here, and they're all from Asia. Vantage Circle, they have something called the Vantage Rewards Agent. And the way that works, again, with Microsoft 365 Copilot, is employee recognition and rewards, right? So you can use, the HR professional can use this sort of program by identifying these deserving employees, giving them opportunity to do recognition. And Copilot just is a little bit smarter about things, saying, hey, this person deserves reward, intrinsic, extrinsic, figuring out what the message should be, putting it on the social, making it feel modern, not kludgy. And you know, anytime you can enhance recognition in that asynchronous way, you get engagement, you get productivity, you get a rewarding workplace. And it's the other side of the coin. So when someone does something well, you reward them, but to get them there, you have to give them the right training and skilling. And I know that that's what you guys do. You just make people better at what they do. So in that broad sphere of making people upskilled, I think AI is playing a really important role already.
Yeah, very personalized, very interactive, outcomes driven. Given that we're talking about partners, I had a couple of questions on that. Partners and use cases, right? One is we were talking about use cases, and you know, you wanted to talk about data as well. So it'll be, you know, helpful to kind of hear your perspective on the role of data in an enterprise AI strategy and, you know, solid outcomes coming out of it.
Look, one of the things that we said internally once is look for companies that have proprietary data that they can feed into the models in order to generate an insight which has value and creates maybe a moat and helps that company do something either better or can use that insight and sell it to somebody else, right? Many companies that are listening will say, oh, I'm in XYZ industry, therefore I cannot supply insights to anyone else in XYZ industry. Well, you can. If you have that data and you can turn it into an insight, you could be a supplier to others in your industry. And that's what we are looking for. If you do not have proprietary data, if you don't have a unique data set that you could potentially leverage by reasoning over it and doing some level of intelligence, I won't use the word AI, but intelligence, even at inferencing time, it could be that your company could even become generate new revenue streams, or just do what it is that you do better, right? And examples of that would be if you're a healthcare provider and you've got unique insights about a population and you leverage that to go do something that helps you improve health outcomes by improving diagnosis, that's a fantastic way in which you could potentially leverage your data. If you're a third party, and I'll give you examples of that in healthcare, and you say, I am going to generate a new data set around a pathology. Let's call it cancer just for the simplicity's sake. And I can look at imaging and identify using humans and AI whether or not an image is evidence of a potential future cancer. So basically, you're making a prediction based on a CT scan or a MRI or even just an X-ray. Is this or is this not potentially cancer? Should we do a biopsy? A human on its own does a great job. And that AI just gets better, could tell a human a couple of things. Number one, hey, you missed that. That could be cancer. That's obviously useful, right? You identify a thing that perhaps you didn't see. And the way that you think about that, and I hate to be colloquial, but this is a good way of thinking about it, is that the machines that we use today, do you have like an old DSLR camera? Like in back in the day, Canon or an Nikon, and you had to choose between like RAW format and JPEG. Vinny, remember that?
Right. Yeah,
and I always chose JPEG, and most people chose JPEG. They're like, well, I can't see the RAW. A human eye can't see the RAW, but it's taking up too much space, so I'm just going to save everything in JPEG. Well, these machines, for all intents and purposes, because doctors and humans are looking at them, save everything in JPEG. But the RAW is actually captured, and the AI is looking at it and saying, hey, wait, can I take a look at that RAW? And by looking at the raw file, they're able to say, hey, that shadow over there, it's cancer. You just can't see it because you're only looking at the JPEG because your acuity is not good enough. And that is the, I don't remember if it's type 1 or type 2 error, that's helping solve. But the other way, which is actually even more useful, some people say, is that the doctor would have prescribed a biopsy and the AI definitively says, oh, no, that's nothing. We've seen this 10,000 times. Don't have an operation. Right. And that's also super helpful. So we've seen companies all across Asia that leverage the fact that we've got a lot of trained doctors or a little bit lower cost that can go in there and develop these and train these models that can then be deployed for mammograms, for like Volpara in New Zealand, which is now part of Lunit, which is South Korean, and Harrison.ai and Bin Group, both from Vietnam/Australia. So all of these companies are doing something similar to that, improving health outcomes by using proprietary data that either they have or that they are capturing or training in order to feed a better outcome. Back to what you said right up front. Better health outcomes is your goal. How do we get there? Have better diagnosis. How do we get there? By having better data.
That's very, very interesting the way you tie outcomes to the process and to the data. And the healthcare is a pretty interesting example. Also, tying to this earlier thing that you mentioned in the conversation about all of us leading more fulfilling careers, right? Yesterday, I was at this place in Bangalore called St. John's Medical College and Hospital, meeting a bunch of doctors and discussing this. And one of the things I asked them was, I said, hey, healthcare is supposed to have the most profound impact coming out of AI very quickly. What do you think about it? And he gave me a very interesting analogy. He said, hey, just the way commercial airliners have evolved, right? Inside a cockpit, you have the instrumentation, you have a co-pilot, and then you have the real pilot. That's really how I think healthcare with a doctor is going to evolve. There's going to be a co-pilot, there's going to be a doctor, and it'll free up doctor to do more empathetic things to the patient.
That's 100% correct. I think that is the vision for how we're headed in the healthcare practice world, HCP world. If you don't mind, I'll tell you a little bit about another area that's super exciting. And it's part of this broader theme that if your listeners are saying, hey, what is Zia really trying to say here is one of the things that gets me excited is AI for design. And you can do all the things around cost savings, you can do all the things around revenue generation. But if you start to design things better as a result of having AI, that is where we get into that second season improvement. And maybe when that third season, when AGI comes along, the tech designs things that we hadn't even thought of, right? So with the Pacific Northwest Laboratories, Microsoft was working with them on battery design. And there was something like 23 million combinatorial ways in which this particular set of elements could be combined. And so the AI went through all of these and rather than testing it in the lab, narrowed it down to some much smaller number in the hundreds, and then down to 23 actual candidates that are very likely to turn into a working battery. And one of them did. And rather than taking years to be able to come up with that one battery design that has just incredible promise, the AI was able to help us get there in 2 weeks.
Fascinating.
Which is a fantastic example of designing a new battery with the basic elements that fundamentally is not possible for humans to do. But the AI can do it at that level of scale
Mm-hmm.
without us. And that's just a good design examples. I'll bring it back to energy. I'm very interested in nuclear, and I'm particularly interested in one day
Yeah.
fusion, of course. And the
Mm-hmm.
tokamak reactor design is something that people are saying, oh, how do you build it? How do you create this stable field? What's the geometry required? Well, we humans could test it, and we could, test it in a lab, we could test it in a sim. But when the AI figures out how to test it, or the AI comes up with a suggestion and then implements it, it could be that the answer to the ideal design of a nuclear fusion reactor from a geometry perspective is now solvable not in 9 to 12 years, but in 1 to 2. And
Awesome.
then you take that question of, oh, we thought things that were going to happen from 2035 to 2040, like
Mm-hmm.
nuclear fusion, are
Mm-hmm.
now going to get solved 2027 to 2031. This is the season 3 hope that
Mm.
sounds like the sparkle that people say, oh, you know what, this is just a lot of fairy dust here. But the design of things that would have taken us a lot longer to get to
Yeah.
can be brought forward if
Mm.
you can iterate through a variety of different cases and
Mm.
find the right design sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense before I get
That
to
makes a
a
lot of
healthcare
sense.
example?
And I think it's a very important point that you brought up, the whole AI for design. And it's probably not discussed often enough because all of us as consumers, we rely on AI as some kind of a data store. We ask it a few questions, generate some text. We never think of AI as much as thought partners or even, generating whole new outcomes with like AI for design that you mentioned, right?
I think young people do, Binny. I
You
mean,
do?
not
Yeah.
us, but they
Okay.
they write songs, they build
Mhm.
they build their art. Um, there are all kinds of ways in which little bits of design, and
Mm.
it's where you do AI is in CapCut. It's showing up on TikTok. It's showing up in everything that we do. So I
Mhm.
think it is in there. But
Yeah.
you're right. We don't talk about it enough in terms of like actually designing real products and services. But let's talk about molecules, right? So drugs.
Yeah.
One of our partners is a real shout out to our friends at InSilico. InSilico is just an amazing company that has done a lot to help big pharma companies
Mhm.
go through and design their drugs using their AI platform, just to simplify it. And they
Mhm.
have their own platform or pipeline of drugs that they have thought through. And the first one for a particular type of lung condition is the first one that got through clinical trial phase 2A ever
Mhm.
using
Mhm.
AI for drug discovery. And so the promise of this particular molecule or drug to deliver outcomes for those who are suffering from this type of fibrosis is amazing because it's happening in units of years, 2 to 3
Mhm.
years, and it
Mhm.
would have taken significantly longer. And this is just the first of many in the pipeline from just this first company.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, and then you add the big pharma, if we start to use AI to combine amino acids and proteins and even a more nano and micro level, or to look at it from a molecule perspective, it is likely, not inevitable, but likely
Mm.
that we will find new solutions
Mhm.
to intransigent problems. I call these career problems. And I
Yeah.
call them career problems because usually when you stumble upon one, and the audience is going to understand this, people will say, oh, I've been struggling with this for my entire career.
Mhm.
Like I really do not know how to do thin file underwriting for an insurance customer that in the emerging markets. I'm just looking for a new way. Career problems are amazing because they open up new markets and they solve problems differently. They require a solution that solves the problem differently than what we've done before. And I
Yeah.
love the idea for AI for design will brute force in many ways, but of course reason and infer better solutions for career problems.
Yeah. No, I think it's very helpful you spend some time on healthcare and molecules and drugs because uh, eventually it'll all help us live longer. And there's one of these light bulbs that turned on in my head a couple of weeks back, which is um, I think that our average life expectancy right now is about 72 or 74 years or something like that.
Mm.
And and this thing about AI will make you live longer and it's 100, 120, and it almost seems unbelievable unless you go back and see not too long ago, the average life expectancy was 60, 62 years. Now it's 12 years more than that. So it's totally in the realm of possibility that that 72 could become 85, 95. or even past 100 fairly quickly based on some of the things you're telling me right now.
Yeah, indeed, that is the CEO of InSilico this is his passion, is that longevity research and the ways in which we can prevent these lifestyle diseases or other diseases from shortening our lives. I have two other examples which are meaningful and purposeful, and then we can either talk about hockey or we could talk about the climate. But we've kind of touched on climate already, and I think that the point of view that I have, and maybe I'll just finish that thought, is yes, we work for Microsoft, and as part of the AI era, we recognize that our supply chain and our demands for energy are higher than we thought. And that energy eventually needs to be green. It needs to be renewable. I don't want to talk about carbon credits. I simply want to think about how might we have always on renewable power. And because of the design acceleration, and because of the different things that we're seeing, I'm a believer in my personal capacity that nuclear is the way to go. And it has been for some time. And you know, that some time means about a year. When I was working as a board member for the EMA, we thought about all the different ways in which we in Singapore will reach our net zero commitments, imports, existing technology, new technologies, including nuclear, and of course, demand response. And now as we look in a Microsoft context or a broader tech context, if we could repurpose existing facilities and make them safe and productive, if we could take existing designs and deploy them from a fission perspective, and then we can invest in fusion and sign power purchase agreements in advance, we're helping validate, Binny, the opportunity for nuclear to be the solution. And by us using our heft and by encouraging our government partners and our suppliers to use renewable energy now or in the next 3 years, we can kind of de-risk it. And I'm hoping that those who are listening don't just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, not in this region, it won't happen. It is at some point an incredibly useful energy source that can solve some of the lasting problems, because once you have clean, cheap energy, you can do electrolysis and do all kinds of other things that give you water and other things. So, you know, eFisheries is a company that is going to help improve the yields of fish farms across Indonesia, and that's using AI already. And it's just an Indonesian solution, but the idea of us providing a safe and secure supply chain and food chain and food security is super important in Asia, especially with climate change. And all of these things are unlocked with good AI for design thinking. And energy is a key component of it, and we think we can get there in X years.
Yeah, makes sense. And you know, given this, this age of intelligence and very soon the age of energy, and you have a passion and career that kind of intersects both these pretty amazingly. What do you think happens if we can't figure nuclear out? Will our pace of AI slow down? Will solar and hydro and all the other things keep pace? What do you think will happen?
I'm not sure there's a lot of technology risk left in Gen 3 plus and Gen 4 reactor design for fission. So I don't think that's possible. We may not have the political will. We may, unfortunately, have an accident within a bunch of the older plants that changes the public perception. God forbid. But I think that the question of there's enough of a diversification of the supply, and you see incredible technology coming from China. France has been using it for years. US, South Korea, SMR technology. You know, there's some question about whether or not it goes down the cost curve quickly enough. But the question about whether it'll work is maybe whether it'll work with the right unit economics and whether it'll work in time. Right? That's maybe a bigger worry, is whether it'll work in time.
Okay.
And then
that's helpful.
But I'm hopeful, and I'm hopefully not coming across as too much of an optimist, but bacteria that basically captures carbon and sinks to the bottom of the ocean incredibly efficiently. So carbon capture and storage. Battery technology that's just incredibly effective, that takes solar and time shifts energy. I'm not a big believer in hydrogen and ammonia anymore because it's a sort of a stopgap solution, and the real final solution can move forward with things like geothermal. We we're an investor in Ever through our fund, and Ever is a Canadian company that does deep new tech geothermal that obviously taps into another power source that's incredibly viable, which is the core. And so with all of these paths, less worried about us not finding a energy solution in my lifetime.
That's comforting to know. Zia, since you mentioned a bunch of wonderful work with your partners, right? Vantage, Mind Valley, Insilico, Fisheries, etc. I'm just curious, as being the point person for business development and partnerships in the region, what are your priorities when you're finding a partner? What filters are you using when you onboard these partners? What are you trying to achieve together? I'd love to know that.
I often ask, who is your customer right up front?
Okay.
What outcome are you trying to achieve? And then understanding what level of traction they already have. And then, of course, is Microsoft an appropriate partner? How do we accelerate it? How do we assist? How do we do co-engineering? That's super important to help build something that no one else has done before. Is it first of its kind? These are the types of questions, Binny, that come through my head. And of course, there's a commercial element if they want to use Azure and Azure OpenAI or any one of our other models. That's also helpful. We're doing great, and we are grateful for the trust that many startups and scale-ups and large companies have placed in us to help solve their AI problems. And if in Asia, I will say that this thank you to the conglomerates and to the innovators inside the large organizations that are doing amazing things with AI on our platforms and on our friends' platforms to make it happen. And not every project is going to be a success, but some are going to yield unexpected results. And it's a big thank you to all of you who are thinking about us as an enabler.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of us on the startup world have benefited significantly from everything Microsoft and Azure has done for us. So yeah, thank you. Since you're on the topic of startups and AI, Zia, one thing I was curious about is in most other previous technology waves, startups had some kind of advantage in terms of speed or being early believers in the technology and faster adoption and things like that, which helped them in a way maybe displace certain incumbents and stuff like that. But in AI, the large established companies seem to be as fast, if not faster, in adoption with the technology. What do you think is different? Why do you think that's happening right now? And how do technology startups find a sweet spot in a environment where they don't necessarily have a big advantage against incumbents?
It's a complex question, and I think there's plenty of opportunity for startups to continue to innovate in the up and down the AI stack, from tools to vertical AI, from small language models to regional models like Sarvam.ai in India, 19 Indic languages, making it more useful. So when we think about AI in the West, it's sometimes somebody typing at a keyboard in English on a screen with a laptop. Whereas conversational AI in Asia is somebody who's maybe not quite literate in a specific language, speaking on an Android phone, on a 3G or 4G network, expecting an answer that's spoken back to him or her, that is multilingual and multimodal, on the back of a scooter. And that's a completely different use case. But the most common use case, Android phone, multilingual, conversational. How are we solving for that? So there's plenty of opportunity for innovation. But at the transformer level, it still seemed that the large language model players were somewhat concentrated with companies that have that level of scale. Certainly when it comes to chips, that also seemed to have some concentration advantages. And those were well documented, so I don't need to speak to them again. But I do think there's plenty of opportunity for innovation up and down the AI stack, from a regional perspective to device perspective, and there's plenty of venture capital money going out that will generate huge returns if you have something innovative, but go back to the outcome. Who's the customer? What are you trying to achieve? What business advantage are they going to yield, or what, lifestyle advantage? I love B2B companies because it's a little bit easier to see the benefit early on.
Yeah, that velocity of early feedback to fine tune PMF. Yeah, makes sense. The off camera we were talking about how you kind of brought together your interest in data science and hockey to put together a Moneyball for hockey. What was the inspiration behind it, and what did it do?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And this might be a great swan song story. And apologies to any listener that's like, I don't really want to hear about hockey, but it's an interesting story. So I'll kind of end with this if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So when I went to school during January, there's something called Independent Activities Period, and this was before Moneyball. There were a lot of people that got together and started thinking about math in the context of sports. And in particular, the sabermetrics movement was just getting started at MIT, and people were thinking about baseball, of course. The data was readily available and it was discrete. And I remember in particular one talk where this guy was trying to claim that a triple was more valuable than a home run. And we laughed and we thought about it. Said, oh, it keeps the rally going. And I just put up my hands and I said, oh, tired of thinking about baseball. I'm from Canada. I love hockey. I'm going to go try to figure out how to do this kind of sabermetrics for ice hockey. And stumbled upon, which has arguably become one of the most interesting and fascinating sports problems, which is the pull the goalie problem. So Malcolm Gladwell did a podcast about this a few years ago, but my research into this started in 1997, for those of you out there who are wondering. And in 2001, I wrote the first paper about this. And basically it said, NHL coaches, when they're losing by one goal at the end of an ice hockey game, are going to lose anyway if they don't do anything. And they have the option to take one of take the goalie out of the net and replace it with a skater. And that skater could potentially score a goal because you're operating sort of 6-on-5. And that improves your probability of scoring by 2.7x. So everyone got this? You score more likely if you take the player out. Problem is that you have an empty net on the other side, and the probability of being scored upon is 5.7x higher. So the question is, how many seconds before the end of the game should you pull the goalie for it to be an indifference point? And so NHL coaches pull the goalie with a minute left to play. And there's all kinds of reasons why they do it that are not mathematical. And I thought, yeah, a minute seems right. So I did the analysis. And it turns out that 5 minutes before the end of the game is the appropriate time to pull the goalie.
Interesting.
But maybe more important than the number was the methodology. And this is the thing that persisted, is that we used to use more of a Poisson model, which is the idea, if everyone remembers this from their statistics classes, that the arrival time in a Poisson model is independent of the arrival time of the previous event. The London bus is the best example. When the next number 14 bus comes, it's got nothing to do with when the last London 14 bus came. So the arrival time is independent. It's not stateful. I said, no, that's not how hockey works. It's a Markov model. It's actually a birth chain model. And Markov and Poisson are fantastic hockey names. But it just so happens that the Markov model creates this chain, Markov chain, and it follows the puck through the various zones and to be a shot into a goal. And the puck just keeps going back and forth. If you ever watched a hockey game, that's the flow of the game. And it's stateful. The probability of being scored upon when the puck is on the other side of the rink is 0. But it changes as the puck moves back and forth. So I created a stateful model, one that uses Markov instead of Poisson. And it turns out the 5 minutes works. Fast forward 15 years, and Mr. Malcolm Gladwell does this talk. These two hedge fund guys, Cliff Aston is one of them, and he does his famous pull the goalie episode. And the two researchers at the hedge fund cite my paper twice and said, I wonder what Zaman thinks about using a Markov model to modulate our result, which is actually really consistent with my old result. And I did, and I created another paper and went on the podcast circuit and went to MBA schools to talk a little bit about the fact that little insights about state really matter in business, in movies, in vaccines. and in option theory, if
Mm-hmm.
you're a trader. But know that those insights are fleeting and that you can only use them with a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
De-risk risky situations with little bits of insights was sort of the title. And I've given this talk at NUS and Spanish Business School and a variety of other places because it's kind of fun to bring math and science and statistics and hockey into the context of data and decisions class for executive MBAs. But at the end of the day, the reason I find this is fascinating is because many of you are data scientists or manage people who do data science. The problem of figuring out how to win in all sports has actually gone from more of a statistical model to a Markovian model
Mm-hmm.
and a stateful model. If anyone watches football or soccer, you will know that there's something called zone 14, which is a place on the pitch from which your probability of scoring is significantly higher.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that the ball moves between the zones can be traced back to that paper I wrote, which basically turns sports from a statistical analysis to a stateful one. Watch the puck.
Fascinating. We could have a whole podcast on this topic, but I'm just going to have one more question,
Okay.
Zia, which is, you said something very profound. Insight, insight on the state. Could you unpack that a little bit and give an example of what would that mean in some scenarios?
Can I talk about vaccines? It's the one that's literally 2-3 years old, but it's an
Yeah.
interesting example because people
Mm-hmm.
kind of will remember this.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have, in the first rollout of the vaccines, we used to have a chart that described how we would ethically dispense them. Older people, at-risk people. You remember, Binny, right? You're nodding.
Yeah.
And we all remember how it worked. But what if the vaccine was expiring on that day and you had extra doses? What do you do about it, right? And it's just going to go into the bin, right? You have to throw them away because they're expiring. So you know what Israel did?
Mm-hmm.
At 4:59 p.m., and I made up that time, but you get the point here.
Yeah.
A minute before the hockey game ends, they would say, oh, we got all these extra doses today. We're not going to follow the schedule. Anyone around who hasn't gotten vaccinated yet? So they went and got the pizza guy and gave him the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And so the logic there is know your state. If the state is that there's a ticking clock and the puck's about to, you're going to lose anyway. You have to throw out the vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Know that state. Know the fact that the value of this public good is going to zero very quickly and act.
Right.
And when it comes to the goalie, know where the puck is. And then if the puck is in the offensive zone, you're not going to get scored upon. Pull the goalie out, and then if you get another face off in the neutral zone, put the goalie back in. Yeah. You're allowed to put the goalie back in. If you're you're a movie studio executive and you're about to get fired, you take a risk on a particular movie, but you de-risk that movie by maybe getting Meryl Streep to play the lead. Yeah. There's all kinds of business ways in which we know when we have a ticking clock and we have some element of risk, and it's slightly desperate scenario, know the state of the game that you're in, and then de-risk these risky situations by coming up with little bits of certainty. That I know this will not happen. Therefore, I can make this move with some level of confidence, and that helps you de-risk things. That's what being stateful is all about.
That's fantastic. I mean, that advice could probably apply to every part of life, right? Don't follow a statistical historical playbook. Look at your assets, look at your liabilities, currently make the next move based on that.
Right.
So, yeah. This has been fantastic, Zia, across AI, energy, statistics, and hockey. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. Really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it.